Martin, are you ready to go?
Go, Terry.
Great. Stephen?
Ready to go.
Okay, Jocelyn? Ready to
Yes.
go? Great. Okay, so we'll begin. Good morning and welcome to this online hearing of the Committee of Adjustment of the City of Ottawa under the Planning Act. The video conference is also live streaming on YouTube. With me are my fellow panel members, Jocelyn Chandler, Stephen Lewis, Terrence Otto, and Martin Vervoort. My name is Fabian Poulin, and I will be chairing this hearing today. The procedure for this hearing will be as follows. Listed on the agenda and appearing on the screen are the applications we'll hear today. For the sake of efficiency, the committee may deal with agenda items in a different order. Committee members have reviewed the planning reports and any written submissions in support or in opposition to each of the applications. They will hear oral submissions from any interested parties. As part of the statutory notification requirements, each applicant was required to post a sign on the property and file a statutory declaration confirming the sign posting. This declaration must be on file today before we can hear the application. Without it, I may have to adjourn the application or administer an oath if necessary. Can the coordinator confirm that we have received the statutory declarations?
We've received the statutory declarations for applications number 5, 6, and 7.
Thank you, coordinator. If we are missing a statutory declaration for the following, for the applications other than 4, 5, and 6, I'll administer an oath if necessary, and when we get to that item. The committee may ask for a brief presentation of the application, followed by questions from members and submissions from the public. Please address your comments to the chair, starting with your name and spelling it if necessary, and your municipal address for the record. The committee limits presentations to 5 minutes. Any exceptions will be at the discretion of the chair. So we will now, before we begin, we have 2 items of business to address. Does any member present have to declare an interest in any of the applications that are before us today or on a panel of another committee panel?
Terry Otto, I have a declaration to declare in regards to number 10.
Thank you, Mr. Otto. I don't believe we have any minutes to adopt today. We will now hear the application scheduled for this hearing and deal firstly with any items that may be adjourned. Is there anyone present who wishes to request an adjournment of one of the applications scheduled for this hearing? Don't believe there are any adjournment requests. Therefore, we will now proceed to item number 1. That is the application at 5873 Perth Street. Good morning, Marcus Richards and Lori Dance. Are you there? Good morning. Lori Dance, are you here? Coordinator, is Lori Dance here?
Mr. Chair, we do not appear to have them in the attendees list. I'm wondering if we can step this matter down until we can contact them. Oh, quite possibly, yes. Sorry, they are here.
Lori Dance and Marcus Richards are both here.
Great. Since we don't have a declaration on file, a statutory declaration on file for your property, we need to administer an oath. Are you prepared to take that oath now?
Yes.
All right. So do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you solemnly swear?
I do.
Thank you. Now we'll proceed to just a brief explanation of your application this morning, please, Mr. Dance. Or Mr. Marcus.
Well, a brief description is as such. Currently, our property is outlined in red on that survey you have before you. The shaded area represents the area that we would like to sever and sell to the adjoining property, which is the little indentation in the circumference of red you see there. It makes much more sense for our neighbors to own the property in that they side on it, and our house is quite removed from that portion of property. We can't really keep an eye out for human traffic, foot traffic that crosses over. There is an insurance issue that I'm a bit concerned about. We live beside a mall, and oftentimes we'll have people using our property, the portion that we'd like to sell, to let their dogs run around, to recreate, and we really can't keep an eye on it as well as we'd like to, particularly at night.
Okay. There's one change I believe that we need to make to the application. That is the lot area. It's not going to be 3,275.51 meters, but it will be 9,751.12 square meters. Is that correct?
That's the remaining property that we will retain, yes.
Okay, perfect. Now I'd like to go to the panel and ask them if they have any comments, questions, or concerns. Mr. Otto, do you have any comments, questions, or concerns?
No, I do not.
Mr. Lewis, do you have any comments, questions, or concerns?
No, I'm fine with this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vervoort, any comments, questions, or concerns?
No, it appears straightforward to me.
Thank you. Ms. Chandler, any comments, questions, or concerns?
I didn't see the comments from the Conservation Authority on this. I don't know if I just couldn't find them. I wonder if the RVCA planner has any comments.
I don't think so. We did speak to a representative of the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority. They didn't have a problem with the sale, but they wanted us to impart to the new owners that no work could be done on the property without their permission. And it turns out that the property is somebody that I know quite well through another business, just coincidentally. And he and I have discussed this at length as to what his plans are for it. And there are no plans in terms of any sort of grading changes or anything like that.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus. I believe we have a member of the Conservation Partners online. Ms. Ogden, are you able to comment?
Hello, Chairman. My apologies. I'm not familiar with the property as it's outside of the Mississippi Valley watershed, but I would defer to any comments that Rideau Valley submitted.
I don't believe we have any comments from the Conservation Authority. At this time, I don't believe there are any
concerns.
Great, thank you. At this time, I'd like to ask the panel for a vote to approve this application. All in favor, please raise your hand. Your application's approved, Mr. Marcus. Ms. Dance?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's a good day.
It's a good day.
Should have the hockey score on the horns.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Okay, we'll now move on to item number 2. Item number 2 is having to do with 126 David Drive. And I'm looking for Mr. Gordon Robinson.
Mr. Chair,
Robinson?
item number 2 is actually 6559 Hazeldine.
Oh, my apologies, you're right.
Sunset Farms there, yeah.
Yes, I'm looking for, I guess, Taylor West, the agent on file for 6559 Hazeldine Road. Are you here, Mr. West?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. I don't have a statutory declaration on file for you. I'd need to administer an oath. Would you, are you available to do that?
Yep.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you solemnly swear?
I solemnly swear.
Thank you. Could you provide us with a brief description of your application, please?
Sure. I believe I also submitted a PDF presentation. Perfect. All right, so the subject site is located off of Hazeldean Road between Rothbourne Road and Kittywake Drive. It's located in the Rideau Goulburn ward of the city of Ottawa on the north side of Hazeldean Road. It's bounded by a vacant municipally owned road allowance to the east, Hazeldean Road to the south, vacant property to the west, to the north. There are wetlands located to the south and to the west of the subject property. It has approximately 305 meters of frontage along Hazeldean Road in an area of 13 hectares, and it's occupied by a detached dwelling, stables, indoor riding arena, paddock, and accessory structures. Access to the site is from a driveway down the center of the property off of Hazeldean Road. Severance application has been filed to create a new lot in the southeastern corner of the property and an easement for access. The land to be severed will have a total area of approximately 2.4 hectares, a depth of 166 meters, and frontage of 146 meters on Hazeldean Road. The retained lot will have an area of approximately 10.8 hectares and a depth of 434 meters and a frontage of 155 meters on Hazeldean Road. Both the severed and retained lot are compliant with the lot width and lot area requirements for the rural zone of the zoning bylaw, which is 60 meters for lot width and 2 hectares for lot area. We're seeking easement in favor to the severed property. Has approximately 15 meters of frontage on Hazeldean Road, a depth of 166 meters, an area of 0.25 hectares. We are aware that we've received comments from Hydro Ottawa that have requested the power lines that run along the east side of the driveway to be located on the retained lands. When we prepare the final survey, we'll ensure that the hydro lines are only on the retained lands, not on the severed lands. We had a pre-consultation meeting with municipal staff on March 5th, 2020. They requested that an MDS report and an EIS report be prepared in support of this application. And they also requested the geotechnical report be prepared as a condition of approval. An MDS report was prepared by Novatech, and I could ask if you go to slide 2. Perfect, thank you. So the MDS report identified an 125 meter separation from the manure storage area, which is located on the back of the property, and the stables. Further, an EIS report was prepared by Kilgore and Associates. If I ask you to just go to the 3rd slide, please. Thank you. So the proposed severance is located outside of the area of impact wetlands to the south and to the west of the property. The building envelope is actually going to be in the northeastern corner, so as far away as we can get away from the wetlands. And the EIS concluded that the proposed severance has no negative impacts to natural features or ecological functions. And once again, it's understood that a geotechnical report will be prepared to address the quality of well water as well as the impacts of the septic system. This is the condition of the severance. With respect to the planning rationale, the proposed severance is consistent with provincial policy statement with respect to locally appropriate lot creation, environmental protection, does not necessitate the construction of new public infrastructure. As such, a plan of subdivision is not required. Proposed development has regard for various matters of provincial interest, including protection of ecological systems, agricultural resources, the conservation and management of natural resources, supply, efficient use and conservation of energy and water, and the orderly development of safe and healthy communities. Proposed severance has an adequate supply of land to ensure space requirements for the provision of private services are available. The proposed severance conforms to the severance policies of the general rural area in the official plan and all the policies of the official plan itself. There's no new demand for utilities for public services as resulting of this application. And it is my opinion this application for severance is consistent with the policy requirements of subsection 5124 of the Planning Act and represents good land use planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. West. Mr. Chown, are you looking to add anything to this right now?
Thank you, Chair Poulin. I was just available to answer questions, but to deal specifically with the comments from Hydro and the submissions of Mr. West, it would be appreciated if the committee could note in the decision that should they approve the application to provide some flexibility in terms of the final reference plan. The severed lot may be slightly narrower than shown on the sketches and is documented in the application in order to ensure that that hydro line is actually located on the retained lands, but we won't have that information until we actually send the surveyor out into the field. So my only request, subject to any other questions the committee may have, is the decision provide some flexibility in terms of the width of the severed parcel so that we can ensure that that hydro line is in fact located on the retained lands. Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. I'd like to ask Mr. Walker to make some comments on behalf of the city.
Morning, Mr. Chair. The department has reviewed the proposal and has no concerns, subject to the conditions below.
Thank you. Our conservation partners, can they comment on their position?
Hello, Mr. Chairman. The Conservation Authority has no concerns with the application. The proposed building envelope has been outlined within the EIS to respect the appropriate boundaries from the wetlands identified.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden. I'd like to ask the panel now for their comments, questions, or concerns. Ms. Chandler?
I don't have any questions.
Mr. Vervoort?
Just one for Mr. Chown. So if the lot width is reduced, then will the depth be increased so the lot area will remain the same?
Thank you for that question. Well, the lot depth is defined by an existing hedgerow, so that I appreciate your question. The lot area will reduce ever so slightly as well if we have to adjust the lot width.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lewis, any comments?
Just no comments, but the lot's 2.4 hectares. If it goes a little smaller, it's still lots of room there.
Thank you. Mr. Otto, any comments?
No comments at the present time. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. West, have you gone through the conditions that we have that Pete has implied or may want to imply?
Sorry, could you repeat that? I didn't quite catch that.
Have you reviewed the conditions of this application that Pete has asked for?
We have reviewed the conditions.
Are you okay with the conditions?
And yes, we're fine with the conditions.
Great, thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to ask the panel to approve the application. All in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is approved, Mr. West and Mr. Chown.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now we'll move on to item number 3, 126 David Drive. Is Mr. Gordon Robinson here? Madam Coordinator, is Mr. Robinson here?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we're just working on bringing him in as a panelist.
Thank you.
I do believe there are some other speakers or other participants that would like to speak on this matter. So if they could just raise their virtual hand so that we can bring them into the meeting as well.
Mr. Robinson, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Robinson, we don't have a statutory declaration on hand right now. I need to administer an oath. Are you able to do that now?
Yep, absolutely.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you solemnly swear?
Yes, I swear.
Thank you. Could you please proceed and provide us with a brief summary of your application?
Absolutely. I think I have a presentation as well too. Let's that up. Hello, Chair and committee members. My name is Gordon Robinson, and I, along with my father, David Robinson, are the owners of 126 David Drive. I'm requesting a minor variance with respect to the existing lot. I'm before you today with a request for a variance of 0.47 meters relief to the lot width requirement of 19.5 meters to bring this lot into conformity with the zoning bylaw and permit a conforming secondary dwelling unit inside the basement of the existing detached house. The lot width of David Drive is 19.03 meters. Required is 19.5. Although this application is very straightforward, for the benefit of the committee and any members of the community who may be watching, I'd like to quickly address how this variance satisfies the 4 tests, if I could.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, next slide, please. So for the first test, allowing relief from the lot width requirement of 0.47 meters has no effect on the budding owners. It's minor in nature. This relief would not provide a loss of sunlight, privacy, views, spacing, or openness. As you can see on the site plan here, the house 126 David Drive is shaded from with lots of privacy from mature trees and shrubs that surround the property and also give privacy to the neighbors on the abutting properties. The mass, height, and bulk of the property is not changed by this variance. A secondary dwelling unit has no requirement for additional parking, no removal of trees or manipulation to the grading. This variance also would not have an effect on the drainage, which is already an ongoing issue in this neighborhood. As you can see, this variance is minor in nature and has no impact on the neighboring properties in the immediate and general area. If I could see the next slide, please. As for the second test, the granting of this variance would most certainly result in a desirable development of and use of the land, not just for us as the owners, but also to the general public and the neighbors. I'll add that this neighborhood is a popular neighborhood for developers and builders who build large infill houses, which may be a concern to the neighbors. Many have applied for minor variances to allow a reduced lot area or reduced rear yard setbacks. There are many that build all the way to their allowed buildable area. These houses do not match the character of this streetscape, as well as affect the neighborhood's drainage. You can see the next slide. The house on the lot at 126 David Drive, it's currently dirty and in a poor state of repair. It's also overgrown with shrubs along the front face of the house. But importantly, aside from these current aesthetic issues, this house precisely represents the established built form and character of the neighborhood. You can see 126 David Drive in the bottom left corner. On the right, you see the street and the houses to the right and left of it. The restoration of the front of this home by replacing the damaged siding, front door, and windows with new materials that match the original style of the home could in no better way enhance and preserve the streetscape and charm of the neighborhood. With the exception of Rockcliffe Park, secondary dwelling units are permitted in all areas of the city, including this neighborhood. The very concept and rule of a secondary dwelling unit is that it must not change the streetscape along the road it's located. The addition of a secondary dwelling unit is desirable both from a planning and public interest perspective. It preserves the streetscape while providing an additional family a home within an existing home. For the third test, the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw are maintained by this variance because only the interior of the house is being changed. The front, rear, and side yard setbacks, building size and height are not affected. This development preserves the large lot size, width and area, and detached dwelling status. It does not change the residential character of the neighborhood, nor the privacy, parking, or access. This development that this variance will grant is compatible with current land use patterns in the zoning bylaw. In fact, this subzone and neighborhood is one where there are many other secondary dwelling units existing inside very similar houses positioned on very similar lots. If I could see the next slide, please. I will, although it's a case-by-case basis and we're talking about this lot in particular, I will mention one other secondary dwelling unit. This is, you noticed on July 8th, 2020, Fort Paulson applied for a minor variance to have the lot width reduced for the very same reason. They were building a new house on the property though with a secondary dwelling unit, and their lot width is 19.05. Ours is 19.03. The lot area and depth are very similar, and it's the exact same zoning, and all other requirements are the same. This variance was granted for them. The main thing with this bylaw, I think, is that it wants to preserve the neighborhood in a way where there's detached homes, so no semi-detached homes, homes with multiple entrances on the front, no apartment buildings, triplexes, fourplexes, fiveplexes. Here, like the concept of a secondary dwelling unit is that it meets zoning bylaws while making housing more affordable and accessible for families in Ottawa, and I think is designed for this type of scenario. Which leads me to the last of the 4 tests. If I could see the next slide. This one's short and simple. The development of this secondary dwelling unit maintains the general intent and purpose of the official plan, which promotes intensification by providing additional housing. The location of 126 David Drive is also in close proximity to where the future light rail baseline station is being constructed. It's the reason we purchased this property and other properties in different neighborhoods close to other future stations across the city. The granting of this variance and development of a secondary dwelling unit will help to make housing more affordable and accessible to families in Ottawa. That concludes my answers to the 4 tests, and I would be happy to answer chair or members' questions at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Before we proceed to that, I'll ask Mr. Walker to provide the city's perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The department has reviewed the application and has no concerns with the proposal. It is important to note that the requested variance is the footprint of the building. The department also notes that the requested variance would allow for the establishment of a secondary dwelling unit, as the applicant mentioned, and not a room in a house.
I think we're having some difficulty, coordinator.
Sorry, can you hear me?
We just lost you for a bit of a time.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. It's also important to note that a secondary dwelling unit is permitted in any detached home as per section 133 of the zoning bylaw, and there currently aren't any other bylaws that would prohibit the establishment of a secondary dwelling unit within this area. At this time, staff has no further questions and no further comments.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the panel for any of their comments. Mr. Otto, do you have any comments or questions?
No comments, thank you.
Mr. Lewis, any comments or questions?
Question, square footage of the house approximately. What's your square footage there?
Approximately, I would say 1,100 to 1,200 square feet.
And is it going to be 2 separate apartments on separate or a rooming house type situation?
No, it would be, as we don't have the exact measurements or how to design it come yet, but ideally we'd like to have an upstairs unit with either 2 bedrooms, 1 master and a guest, or 1 master bedroom and 2 other bedrooms, so 3. And then the basement would be 2 bedrooms.
2 total separate units. Okay, thank you. No more questions.
Mr. Reward, any comments or questions?
None at this time.
Thank you. Ms. Chandler, any comments or questions?
Just to be crystal clear, if this lot was, like, this is sort of an existing lot, if this lot was 19.5 meters, this secondary dwelling unit would be allowed. It's simply that the lot was created slightly small that's creating the requirement for this variance. Am I correct, Mr. Walker?
To you, Mr. Chair, yes, that is correct.
Thank you, that's all.
Okay, and now I'd like to go to the public. There are several people, several speakers from the community would like to have an opportunity to address this application. I don't see anybody's hands. Wait. So we've got Mr. El Sabah? Mr. El Sabah? No. I've got a person named Jennifer. A person named Jonathan. Okay. Madam Coordinator, can you help direct me to people here that are on the list? I know some of them are not part.
His mic and his camera so that he can address the committee.
Okay.
Perhaps we can go to Mr. Elsabag. If he could turn on his camera and unmute his microphone.
Sorry, I'm actually one of the applicants. I'm not sure if I did something wrong here. Should I not be here right now?
No, if that's fine. If you don't have anything to add to the application, then we'll just leave you.
Yep.
I'm looking for Mr. Hamilton. I don't see him on my screen.
Hello.
Oh, there you
This
go.
is Mr.
Okay.
Hamilton. Yes,
Hello, Mr. Hamilton. Are you addressing yourself to 126 David Drive?
I am, sir. Yes, thank you very much for calling on me.
You're welcome. A reminder, we have a 5-minute rule here for each presenter, and we should be looking at new information to be added to the discussion when a new presenter comes along.
Have the information and the view that comes from a resident of the area. I've lived here for 14 years, and over those years, I've noticed a change in the area because changes to the different properties on the street. And so I've noticed that there are a number of different properties that have been rented out, and they're rented out to unrelated occupants. And I think that the intention of the owners was to rent it out to a family. However, they rent it out to a person who then brings in other people and other people that are not part of their family. So this changes the neighborhood. We find that there are many, many more cars in the driveways, to the point where landlords have extended the width of their driveways. So this changes the single-family residential feel of the neighborhood. So in this case, rather than a single family in that building, there will be at a minimum 2 families, and we don't know if all of the people that will be occupying those units will in fact be related, and we may see just a furtherance of the degradation to the single family dwelling feel of the neighborhood. Another thing, I noticed that the gentleman from the city said that there were no other bylaws relating to secondary dwellings in this neighborhood, but my counselor's office has advised me that there is another bylaw that relates to secondary dwellings. And it has something to do with, even though I haven't seen that bylaw, it has something to do with the owner of the unit having to live in the primary dwelling when a secondary dwelling is added to that unit or to that building. So those are the 2 things that I wanted to bring up. Thank you very much for the chance to speak. I oppose the variance.
Thank you for your input, Mr. Hamilton. Mr. Walker, can you enlighten us on that bylaw, that other bylaw that Mr. Hamilton just suggested was in play here?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. City staff, I've spoken to several members of city staff and no one is aware of such bylaw in place.
Mr. Walker, is there a bylaw requirement that the homeowner has to live in the dwelling and that it must be a granny suite, for example, that a relative would occupy that secondary dwelling?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's not the case for secondary dwelling units.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there somebody else that would like to speak to this matter? Or would you like to say something more, Mr. Hamilton?
No,
Sorry.
I'm fine. Thank you. I said my thing.
Thank you. And who would be next? Madam Coordinator, can you pick someone of those persons that are on the list?
Mr. Chair, I do not believe that there's anyone else here to speak to this application.
Okay. I'll go one more time around the horn and ask the panel members if they have any questions. Mr. Vervoort, do you have any comments or questions?
Wondering if the bylaw that's being referred to is the new Airbnb bylaw, which requires an owner to live in the house if they're renting or making available another room in their house. Because I'm not aware of anything either. So those are just my comments. The only other thing I would say too is I understand the comments from Mr. Hamilton and his concerns. But I think it's important to remember that the only thing we're really considering here is the variance itself, not the general policy and the infill policies that the city is trying to promote. So I believe that the requested variance speaks for it.
Thank you, Mr. Vervoort. Mr. Lewis, any other comments?
Nope.
Thank you. Mr. Otto, any
No
further comments?
Thank you.
Ms. Chandler, any further comments?
No, and I agree with Mr. Vervoort that there was a bylaw passed less than a year ago that relates to short-term rentals for Airbnb, requiring people only to rent out their primary residence. But this is not the case with secondary units, so I have no comments or questions.
Mr. Robinson, are you planning to operate this as an Airbnb?
Not at all, no.
Okay, thank you. This time I'd like to call on the panel to approve the application. All in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is approved, Mr. Robinson. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members.
I will move on to application number 4, having to do with 2680 Colonial Road. Mr. Willard McWilliams, are you here? Mr. McWilliams?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Thank you very much, sir. Can you please give a brief description of your application this morning?
Good morning, Chair and committee members. I'm Willard McWilliams. I'm acting on behalf of my son, Wayne, who owns the property, and Mr. Nicholas Dessin, that owns the farm adjacent to it. Anyhow, Mr. Dessin agreed to sell enough property to this lot to make it a viable size. It was a small lot, and the zoning is going to stay the same. It's agricultural farm around it, and the zoning on the lot is AG2, and this severance, if approved, is going to be the property around AG2 that Mr. Dessin is transferring. So, and Dessin's farm will stay in agriculture, and this small parcel
excuse me, that's going to be transferred to this lot will be the same zoning as the lot.
Thank you, Mr. McWilliams. One thing I've omitted to do is to have you take an oath because we don't have a statutory declaration on file for you for this property. Are you prepared to take that oath now, sir?
I am.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing, as instructed, and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you solemnly swear?
I do.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask Mr. Walker to make some comments on behalf of the city, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The department has reviewed the application, has no concerns with it. As Mr. McWilliams mentioned, there is a condition that requires the southern portion to be rezoned from AG4 to AG2. And the purpose of that rezoning is because on the portion that's on AG4, there can be no residential development. In the event that Mr. McWilliams wants to relocate the house on the property or expand it into the portion that's on AG4, he would not be able to without a zoning bylaw amendment at that time. Given that the zoning bylaw amendment isn't a typical requirement of a lot line adjustment application, if at any point, during the condition clearance stage, if Mr. McWilliams decides that he doesn't want to move forward with the rezoning anymore, the department can clear that condition without any issues, as to not hold up the approval process.
I guess, Mr. Walker, your intent is try to help Mr. Walker potentially if he wants to develop the other property, but it's not a requirement.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Any comments, Mr. Otto?
No comments, thank you.
Mr. Lewis, any comments, questions, or concerns?
No, I think this is a lot better. That lot was very small before. It's good.
Thank you. Ms. Chandler, any comments?
No, I have no comments, but I'm not sure that I clearly understood if the applicant would like that zoning bylaw amendment as part of the conditions.
Mr. McWilliams, do you want to have that bylaw amendment, the zoning bylaw amendment?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Are you familiar with the conditions that the city is asking for this application, Mr. McWilliams, and are you comfortable with them?
Yes, we are.
Perfect. I would now like to ask the panel to approve this application. All those in favor, please raise your hand.
Mr. Chair, sorry,
Did I
Mark.
forget you?
I just had a couple of questions for Mr. Walker really quickly.
Okay.
So Mr. Walker, when you say that without the rezoning, no residential development can take place on the A4 portion of the property, the A4 zone portion of the property. So if the owner wanted to, for example, relocate his septic system or build a garage on the A4 portion of the property, would that be permitted or not permitted?
The septic system is to serve the residential development, and so my understanding is that would not be permitted in that section either.
That would not be permitted?
Yes, because it's accessory to the residential development.
So, and if he wanted to build a garage, for example, that wouldn't be permitted either without the rezoning.
Yes, that's correct. If it's accessory to the residential development, it would not be permitted.
With respect to the rezoning, my suggestion to the committee is that we impose it as a condition, but leave it optional to the applicant. So if they want to pursue it, they can. If they decide not to, then it'll just be cleared as a condition. That gives the applicant some flexibility to decide if things change. That would be my suggestion. I'm in favor of the application.
Okay. I think with Mr. Vervoort's amendment, it would further clarify that the option is with the applicant rather than, and it can be cleared fairly easily. So I'm in favor of that addition. All those in favor of the application, please raise your hands. Your application is approved, Mr. Williams, McWilliams.
Thank you.
You're welcome. now move on to application number 5. Location is 2045 Hague Drive. And it is Puya Castagani. Mr. Castagani, are you here? Mr. Castagani?
Can you hear us now?
Yes, we can. Good morning.
Good morning, Howard.
Could you please give us a brief description of the application that you are trying to get today?
So we're looking to construct a new second floor addition over the existing first floor of this single dwelling house, as well as attached one-story garage.
And okay, that's great. Mr. Walker, do you have any comments on behalf of the city?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The department has reviewed the application and has no concerns with the request. Staff is satisfied that the variance is technical in area, as the actual rear yard functions as an interior side yard, and the actual interior side yard functions as the rear yard. As such, staff is satisfied that the board tested that.
Thank you very much. I believe forestry has indicated that there are 2 trees at the north end of the property that you need to install protection when you do construction. And that Hydro Ottawa is looking for clearance to the overhead lines. They should be maintained. Hear that? Any comments from panel? Mr. Revort, any comments, questions?
Just wanted to make sure there's enough room to construct your garage and still not encroach on the easement. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's right. So if you go to the second slide, the third slide, it shows that we're going to have about a 4.5 foot of space between the property line to the south and to the garage.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Ms. Chandler, any comments or questions?
None.
Mr. Lewis, any comments or questions?
No comments or concerns.
Thank you. Mr. Otto, any comments, questions, or concerns?
No, I'm fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, this time I'd like to ask the panel for approval of this application. All in favor, please raise your hands. Mr. Castagani, your application is approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair and committee.
Now I'd like to move on to application number 6 and 7. Ms. Libman, are you here?
I am. Hello.
Hello. Are you joining us from Mont Sainte Marie?
I sure am. Yeah. But it's raining here too, so don't. Actually, not today. It was until my kids are off at camp, and it rained until 5 minutes before they left.
Okay. Can you give us a brief description of the application that you hope to achieve today?
Sure. So I have a presentation that's just come up. Basically, the owner would like to construct a semi-detached dwelling. The previous single detached dwelling has already been demolished. The proposed lots comply with the zoning bylaw, and so the owner actually went ahead and applied for a building permit to construct the semi-detached. It was through that process that Forestry Services became involved and noted the presence of distinctive trees on the property. The owner has worked with Forestry Services and with the Planning Department to alter the building plans to save the white elm at the front of the property. So that's resulted in an increased front yard setback, which has led to the 2 minor variances that are before you. Next slide, please. So this shows the white elm that will be protected, and you can see that the building has been demolished. Next slide, please. So the variances for the interior lot As a result of that increased front yard setback, we're seeking a reduced rear yard setback. Originally, we applied for 7.48 meters, but through discussions with planning, we realized that we were not quite meeting the rear yard area requirements. So we increased the rear yard setback to 7.63 meters, which avoids a variance for rear yard area. So the variance is now from 8.53 meters, which is required, to 7.63 meters. This is less than what was applied for, so I think we're okay to proceed. On the corner lot, the requested variance is to permit a reduced corner side yard setback of 3 meters, whereas 4.5 meters is required. And no variances are required to create the lots. They meet the frontage and area requirements. Next slide, please. So this is just a plan showing you the 7.63 meter rear yard setback on the interior lot at the bottom and the 3 meter side yard setback at the top. Next slide, please. Oh, I have the elevations here. If you're interested, we can just go through them quickly, just move through those 4 slides. We did do a little bit of consultation in the area. The applicant delivered letters to these surrounding houses, and we have not received any comments. Next slide, please. So I can just quickly run through the 4 tests. I submit that the variances maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, as it regulates compatibility through the establishment of lot sizes and performance standards, all of which are met except for one on each lot. But as noted, it's as a requirement of the increased front yard setback and to retain that white elm tree. Which leads to the official plan. And of course, the official plan has a focus now on maintaining mature trees in the urban area. And so I think definitely the balance to be found between small variances and tree retention is found in this application. Next slide, please. Is it desirable for the development of the property? I would say so. It will allow for the creation of 2 semi-detached units on fully complying lots. The tree will provide visual interest and screening, as well as shade in the summertime. And is the variance minor? Yes, it is. Of course, we know that it's not a numerical question, but a question of impact. And for the interior lot with the reduced rear yard setback, 7.53 meters is adequate and is actually what's required in some areas of the city, and certainly provides adequate amenity space with that distinctive tree in the rear yard as well. And in terms of the corner side yard setback, the Ritchie Street frontage, the facade will be articulated and will provide visual interest. And then to the eye, there will also be the sidewalk and the grass boulevard, which provides additional setback from the street. There won't be any sightline issues. And the next slide. In terms of the consent, I would say that no plan of subdivision is not required for the reasons that I've previously outlined. There's adequate parking and amenity space on site, adequate services. The lots are regularly shaped and they do meet the bylaw. Next slide, please. Or perhaps that's the last slide. Oh, no. So we received comments from Hydro, Building Code Services, Planning Services, and none had any concerns, as well as Forestry Services, which just noted that a tree disclosure report will be required for the building permit. One has been submitted, but it will be updated to indicate the retention of that white elm in the front yard. And we're not aware of any comments from the public. So subject to any questions, that's my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Libman. May I have Mr. Walker make some comments on behalf of the city, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The department has reviewed the applications and has no concerns with the consent nor the minor variance. As Ms. Libman noted, the variances are a result of consultation with the forestry department. Forestry is satisfied with the proposal as is. And at this time, staff has no further comments.
Thank you. Any comments from the panel? Mr. Otto?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Mr. Lewis?
No questions, comments?
Mr. Vervoort?
No questions or comments. I think it meets the 4 tests.
Thank you. Ms. Chandler?
I have no questions.
Thank you very much. So we have 2 applications here, number 6 and 7. Number 6, I'd like to have the panel vote on number 6 at the front end. All those in favor of application number 6, please raise your hand. Thank you. Now I'd like you to vote on application number 7. All those in favor of application number 7, please raise your hand. Ms. Libman, both applications have been approved.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. I'd like to move on to application number 8. Having to do with 3546 Paul Anka Drive. Alain Bisson. Mr. Bisson, are you here? Mr. Bisson.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. My name is Faris Al-Sabah. Alain is actually getting tested for COVID as we speak.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, no worries. Hopefully everything's okay. He just had interactions with folks at the building code department, so he just wants to make sure everything's okay.
Okay.
So hopefully you're okay with me presenting on our behalf. I guess I was on the agenda anyways.
That's fine. No, not a problem. We just need to administer an oath because we did not have a statutory declaration. So are you prepared to take that oath now, sir?
Yes, sir.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you solemnly swear?
Sorry about that. I do, yes.
Great. Can you please provide us with a brief description of your application?
Absolutely. So, oh, there we go. We are looking for a relief on the front yard setback here for 2.95 meters, wherein the front yard setback is 3 meters. And we're looking for a relief on the side yard here to 1.1 when the, oops, I think, does somebody else have control of this?
The coordinator does. She's the one moving things through the
okay.
On screen.
Yeah, so this was the original plan here. So I think it's important to note that the house is already built. And it was originally built with permit plans that work within the existing bylaws. So 3 meter front yard setback and 1.2 meter side yard setback. And what ended up happening, if the coordinator can go back to the as-built survey. As you can see here, we were 1.1 on the side yard and then 2.95 on the front yard. The best explanation I can give you to why that happened, I mean, we're 4 inches too big here, and it's mostly because of the brick cladding that put us a little bit over. And on the front yard setback, I guess it was just a bit of error on that 2 inches. It was built in the winter time, and sometimes these these things can happen. So this house is already built, and I was hoping that we could get these minor variances approved.
Thank you, Mr. Elsabaugh. Mr. Walker, any comments on behalf of the city?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The department has reviewed the proposal and has no concerns.
Thank you. Any comments, questions, or concerns, Ms. Chandler?
No comments.
Mr. Lewis? You're muted.
No problem. Numbers are very minor. I'm surprised. I'm surprised the city picked this up.
Yeah, me too.
Mr. Vervoort, any comments, questions, or concerns?
I just had a question, like on the survey, it shows a distance from the front yard lot line to a corner of the house that shows 1.58. I'm just wondering how the front yard setback is calculated. Because it looks like, because it shows the 2.95 on the plan of survey, but then there's other distances and parts of the house that look closer. So I just wonder if maybe the applicant or maybe Mr. Walker can explain.
I can explain on that lightly. So the number 1.58 and 2.57 is part of the porch, which is considered a permitted projection.
Okay.
So it's allowed up to, it has to be, I guess the front yard setback for a permitted projection is 1 meter.
Okay. Oh,
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vervoort. Mr. Otto, any comments or questions?
No, it looks okay to me. Thank you.
Great. So given no further comments or questions, I'd like to ask the panel for approval of this application. All in favor, please raise your hand. Your application is approved, Mr. Elsabaugh.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys.
I hope Mr. Bisson is going to feel well. Hope it's not hope he stays healthy.
Hope so. Thank you.
Thanks.
Stay safe, everybody.
Yeah, you too. Now we move on to, we're going to skip, no, we're not going to skip. We're going to go on to number 9. And Nicholas Bro. Mr. Bro, are you here?
Yes, I am here, Chair.
I need to administer an oath because we did not receive a statutory declaration. Are you prepared to take that oath now?
Yes, sir.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you solemnly swear?
I swear.
Thank you. Would you please provide us with a brief description of your application today?
Absolutely. So again, my name is Nicholas Bro. I work for Robertson Martin Architects, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the owner of the property, Mr. Logan, at 225 Deschamps. 225 Deschamps is located in Vanier on obviously Deschamps Street between the Vanier Parkway and Montreal Road. So just a brief background on the property. This was constructed approximately in the 1920s as a single family home. And in 1954, it was converted to a duplex via a building permit of the City of Ottawa. Now, since then, there have been several alterations to the interior layout of the space. And at this point in time, it was purchased by Mr. Hedman in the summer of 2019. And then shortly afterwards, in the fall of 2019, there was an unfortunate fire, which damaged the majority of the front portion of the home, and it is currently still unrepaired. And at that time, that's when Mr. Logan, the owner, approached us to assess the property and determine the best course of action to repair it. At that time, given our zoning analysis, it's when we noticed that this was effectively transformed or converted into a non-conforming 5-plex within the existing duplex footprint that was legally built in 1954. So we had a pre-consultation with city planning staff, and we did a view and release to obtain those building permits and discover the non-conformance. So this property is currently zoned R4E, and upon several discussions with the owner, it was determined that the best course of action would be to look to forego the 5 units, which were non-conformance, and actually drop it down to a triplex, a 3-unit, which would bring it closer to conformity with the zoning bylaw. Now, as a result, to permit increase from a duplex to a triplex, we've encountered 3 variances. I'll start with the more minor ones in nature, which have to do with the lot width. For a triplex in this zone, you require 15 meters, and the lot is currently 10.06 meters. Now, the second variance here is the lot area, of course. We require 450 square meters for the 3-unit, whereas the property is currently only 270 square meters. And then last but not least has to do with the interior side yard setback. Given the non-permitted work that was done over the years to this home, we have discovered that a 2nd-story addition was built at the rear. This was built directly over top of the permitted 1st-story addition dating back to 1954, which converted this single family into a duplex. Now, given that the building footprint is effectively grandfathered in, this 2nd-story addition, given the time frame that it was built in, is not subject to those laws. Therefore, it is currently encroaching at the northeast corner, the interior side yard setback. So in order to successfully convert this into a triplex, we're requesting relief for a rather small portion at the northeast corner, only at the 2nd story, to actually retain this non-conforming addition. As you can see here, thank you, Coordinator, for running through the presentation. So we're seeking relief on the interior side yard from a total of 3 meters down to 2.85 to permit this section of encroachment. And just quickly going to run through the benefits of allowing this section to remain is that exterior stair that you see here on the elevation will actually move inside the building. And as I said before, we are converting this from a 5-unit down to a triplex. Therefore, it will create more spacious units. And of course, we will be going through an official building permit, and that will update the units, bring them up to code. And in order to even further better the building by regaining some of that non-conforming residential space within the units, we will be creating a communal laundry. As I said, there will be larger units, which one will be a 3-bedroom at the 2nd floor. And last but not least, there will be a bit of a regain of a rear yard amenity area, given that that stair will move inside. And that's about it in terms of where we are at right now in the design of this property. We did look through and receive city comments. We are aware that there was no concerns from city planning staff. There was a brief discussion between the owner and the neighbor to the east at 229 Deschamps. There were no concerns there as well. They were actually quite happy to see that we were taking a non-conforming 5-unit down to a triplex. Last but not least, forestry had no concerns, and neither did Hydro Ottawa. And that concludes my presentation for today.
Thank you, Mr. Brill. May I ask Mr. Walker to have some comments with respect to this application on behalf of the city?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The department has reviewed the proposal and has no concerns. Staff recognize that the variances are requested as a result of the change in use of the currently existing building, and recognize that there won't be any changes to the building, to the existing building footprint. At this time, staff has no further comments.
Thank you very much. Mr. Brill, I just noticed on some of the information that I have in hard copy on a site plan or a site plan
Yes.
dated 2020-05-12. It shows
Yes.
a vinyl clad shed at the back of the property. Is that still there?
That is still there, yes.
Is it intended to still continue to be there?
No, it is intended to be removed and repurpose that rear yard as a better amenity space.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions or comments from the panel? Ms. Chandler, any comments?
Where is the parking for the units?
This does not require any parking. given the general urban area, inner urban area X, there would be no parking requirement for a triplex. There currently is a driveway to the west that is to remain. But other than that, for the increase from a duplex to a triplex, there is no official zoning bylaw parking requirement.
Okay, provided that Mr. Walker doesn't have anything to add to that, that's fine. Thank you.
You're very
Mr.
welcome.
Walker, do you have anything to add to that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Bro is correct. As per section 4 of the zoning, as for part 4 of the zoning bylaw, there are no required parking spaces for this property.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Mr. Lewis, any comments, questions, or concerns? You're muted again. You're muted.
Keeps automatically doing that. No questions or concerns, but I find the parking thing a little strange. That's
Okay.
all.
Thank you. Mr. Vervoort, any comments, questions, or concerns?
None, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Otto, any comments, questions, or concerns?
No, like Mr. Lewis, I find it strange that they don't require parking, but that's beside the point. No other questions.
Thank you very much. This time I'd like to ask the panel for approval of this application. All in favor, please raise your hand. Your application is approved, Mr. Bro.
Great. Thank you very much, Chair and panel members.
You're welcome. We're going to skip application number 10 as Mr. Otto has a conflict, and we'll move on to application number 11. We'll get to number 10 as soon as Mr. Otto excuses himself after we complete this last application. This application is for 3368 Carling Avenue, 1 Bedell Drive. Rosalind Hill is the applicant. Ms. Hill, good morning.
Morning.
Could you please, I need to administer an oath because we did not get a statutory declaration. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you solemnly swear?
I do.
Thank you very much. Please provide us with a brief description of your application.
Okay. So the site is located at the corner of Carling and Bedale. Carling, as you know, is a busy street. The yacht club is diagonally across the street. There's a walking path along the river. So the river is visible from the site. But to the south of Carling, on the south side of Carling, there's a mix of uses along the street, largely residential. The property used to have a corner store and the neighbor is a doctor's office. Beyond that into the neighborhood, there's a mix. So there's, but immediately adjacent to us to the south is a cluster of single family housing. Next slide, please. This is an image that was brought to you in a previous application to the Committee of Adjustment for a small apartment building. And that application came with a list of variances, I think 7 or 8 variances. So next slide, please. We have reconsidered our proposal, reduced the size of the building, and switched from a condo proposal to a rental proposal. So this building still has 15 dwelling units, but the footprint is significantly smaller, allowing a much larger rear yard and much more space between this development and the single family housing that is to the south of us, across the rear yard from us. Next slide, please. Oh, actually, if we back up one slide, it's also been designed with kind of a townhouse architecture in mind, or brownstone architecture in mind, so as to break up the massing and specifically designing it to fit in with the smaller scale housing, because it is a location of transition from a mix and a busy street where higher density is appropriate to the lower density neighborhood behind. So we specifically chose this style and the use of the contrasting vertical colors to break up the massing and to to make it a better complement in its transitional purpose. Next slide. This is the site plan. So it's not the site plan we originally submit with our application. And that's because we've been continuing to engage in consultation with the community, and particularly with the immediate neighbor to the south and any neighbors in the immediate area who are interested in the cedar hedge that our southern neighbor owns. Also, a little bit of it turns the corner onto the property of our eastern neighbor. So the site plan, I'll speak to it generally, and then I'll speak to the changes that we've been making. The changes haven't affected the building or the variances requested. So the proposed apartment building, 3 stories of apartments, 15 units. The grade area shows the footprint of the building. So you can see that there's a main front door facing Badale, which is a quieter street. It would be difficult to enter on Carling because it's so busy. And the driving entrance is to the south end on the Badale property, allowing cars to enter an underground parking area. There are 3 cars at the base of the driveway, so that you drive in and then down a ramp so that you're about 5 feet below grade. And there are 3 visitors parking spaces, and then the entrance to the parking garage where there are parking spaces for the residents. The rear area of the site plan is where we have changed things over the past couple of weeks. And that's because we've been working to meet the expectations of the arborist when it comes to retaining the hedge. So we were advised by our arborist that the site plan that we submit to you earlier would not preserve the hedge, particularly because of the pathway, the exit pathway that was located right against our southern property line. So we switched up the design to eliminate that pathway in that location. And he had also recommended that we don't disturb the soil beside the cedars within 1.2 meters of our rear property line. So we revised the drawing and then consulted with the neighbor to the south, explained the situation, the change for to the drawing, talked it through with him. He still had concerns about the hedge. I believe he still has concerns about the hedge, but we felt that we were satisfying the arborist's concerns and had every confidence that the hedge would live. But when we went away from that meeting, we did our last due diligence of checking with our soils engineer. And we discovered that because of some previous sewer works on the property where an existing sewer line had been removed, and it was quite deep and it was next to that hedge, that in fact, our revised plan, not seen here, still wouldn't save the cedars, because in order to put in the retaining wall locating and the location of the garbage and the parking on that disturbed soil, we would have to dig deeper and have a wider footing. So we adjourned our meeting from last time and took another kick at the can. So this is our 3rd revision to the rear yard, and we are now very confident that we can save the cedars. So we are very far from the cedar hedge now. In fact, we almost don't need our variance to the 3-meter buffer, because we're allowing almost that 3 meters. We're down to the decimal points of difference there, 2.9 something in buffer. But what this means is that in spite of the disturbed soil and our need to dig deeper and have a wider footing on a retaining wall, we can definitely respect the 1.2 meter distance from our property line, and we can definitely protect that hedge. So as a result, our rear area now looks as you see on the screen. So with almost 3 meters between the southern property line and the proposed retaining wall, our garbage bins are lined up, backing onto that wall. So they are almost completely below grade level of the lawn beside them. The exit pathway goes down into the depressed parking area and out up the ramp with guardrails or handrails, grips on the ramp, so that in case of an emergency, pedestrians can exit up the ramp. That keeps the pathway as well as the retaining wall well away from the hedge. Next slide, please. The zoning on the site is unique, and it's because that property used to be a corner store. So instead of being a residential zone, it's an LC zone. The only reason that there is a 3-meter landscape buffer required on this property, for which we're asking a variance, which now is a minuscule variance, that landscape buffer is required between LC zones and residential zones in the event that LC could be developed as a corner store again, or something like that, where a buffer would be really important. In this case, it's relatively insignificant because it's residential against residential. But in any case, our actual buffer now, our variance is to reduce it to 1.5, and we understand that we can't change the wording of our variance at this time without adjourning today. So we'd like to keep the wording of that variance, but we're happy to be held to that dimension so that it's appreciated that we're actually providing more than the 1.5. Next slide, please. Our second variance is for the garbage enclosures. So there's a clause in the bylaw that states that garbage must be stored in sheds. Sorry, it must be stored in a building in this LC zone. Over the past 3 years, we've consulted with the community association 3 times formally, plus some conversations between. There have been a lot of different ideas about how best to deal with garbage and how to ensure that garbage isn't venting toward the doctor's property to the east. And this, after long consideration and discussion, seems to be the best solution for garbage, because these little sheds will be below the grade beside them, almost completely below grade. They're out of sight. This seems to be the most discreet way of storing our garbage that seems to meet everybody's needs in the best possible way we can. And it doesn't seem to meet the letter of the bylaw, but it does seem to meet the intent of the bylaw. The intent of the bylaw is that you don't leave your garbage lying around, but you cover it up. So these aren't technically buildings, but they are covering the garbage. They're enclosing the garbage in a way that is out of sight and seems to meet everybody's needs as best we can. Next slide, please. This chart on the left shows it's a comparison between the variances that we were requesting with the previous application and the variances now. So in blue are the variances we still are requesting today. So to reduce the parking space requirement, to reduce the landscape buffer, I've already spoken to that. And to permit the garbage to be stored in sheds rather than a building. So I'll speak now just to the parking. We are proposing to provide essentially 1 parking space per dwelling unit, plus an extra so one of the dwelling units can have 2 parking spaces. With the full appreciation that people, when they rent in this building, are going to be choosing a lifestyle where they have only 1 car per household. We believe that people ought to have that choice, especially in a city where we're starting to promote less car use. We know that this is a location without rapid transit, but we also know that this is a location where you can live with 1 car per household. And for those people who would choose that, we would like to offer that choice. Complementing that choice, we know that this is a neighborhood where there isn't much choice for residents to live in an accessible unit, in a building with an elevator. So as you age in this neighborhood, there aren't great options, and we are providing an option that's appropriate for that. On the right, you see our consultation chart, and I'm not going to go through that, but we have consulted extensively with neighbors and community association, and feel that we've been able to address many of the concerns, and particularly the hedge concerns around fencing. So next slide. This is actually an older diagram. but it's still useful in the slide deck because it shows the relationship of the proposed building to the neighboring building. So we are no longer proposing to provide the deciduous tree that you see in that location. But in fact, the cedar hedge has grown and is taller than this. And we're going to be retaining it in an L-shaped pattern around the back of the lot. So you can see that only from the third floor would you barely be able to see over the cedar hedge, and only at a distance into the yards beyond. So there's actually quite a lot of privacy between the proposed building and the neighbors. Next slide, please. This is the older site plan in case we needed a comparison. Is there anything left in the slide deck? Okay, and I included the elevations in case I needed to refer to them in questions. So I'll just finish up by speaking to the 4 tests. So really we've got the 3 variances: the landscape buffer, the parking, and the garbage storage. So minor in nature. Our landscape buffer issue is very minor in nature now, it's minuscule. Our parking, yes, I believe it's minor in nature to propose.
Madam Coordinator, I think we may have lost Ms. Hill.
I believe we have. Oh,
There
she's
she
back.
is. Okay.
Hello. Sorry about that.
We did not hear the last portion of your discussion about
Okay.
the second test.
Okay, so 3 variances: landscape buffer, parking, and garbage storage. When we think about whether it's minor in nature, the landscape buffer is now very small. So yes, very minor in nature. The parking, it's simply a question of whether we would allow people to make a choice to have 1 car instead of 2. And I believe that is very minor in the context of today's world, where many people do choose to live in their household with only 1 car. The garbage storage, very minor in the sense that we're actually just choosing an option that's right for the site. Appropriate and desirable. It's hard to even know what to say. Yes, the landscaping is appropriate and desirable because we're practically meeting that requirement. The parking is desirable. It is very desirable to be locating people in a building in this neighborhood that lacks that type of building, that type of housing choice. It's appropriate and insignificant, the level of parking that goes along with that choice. And the garbage storage is appropriate. It is the most appropriate solution for the site. So in keeping with the bylaw, the landscape buffer, the intent of that clause in the bylaw actually had to do with a use on our site that was non-residential. So we are in keeping with the bylaw. The parking, you'll see in other parts of the bylaw that every opportunity is being taken to reduce parking requirements in respect because we are honoring people's choices to use less car commuting and less car dependency. And the garbage storage issue and the intent of the bylaw. I think the bylaw only really intends for you to keep your garbage clean and out of sight. And lastly, in keeping with the official plan. So we certainly are proposing enough landscaping for the official plan, a form of intensification that is appropriate in this transitional location between a very busy street and a neighborhood, and a garbage solution that is sensitive to neighbors.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. I'd like to ask Mr. Walker to have some comments with respect to this application on behalf of the city.
The department has had an opportunity to review the initial proposal and had no concerns at the time. While I haven't had an opportunity to review the revised site plan, given that the variances seem to be the same, I would say I have no concerns with those either. I would also note that the property is subject to an ongoing site plan control application, and a comprehensive review of the overall proposal will be done at that time. At this point in time, I have no further comments.
Thank you very much. Madam Coordinator, do we have a speaker from the community that would like to add his comments or her comments?
We do have several speakers, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if Peggy McGilvery, she's with the Community Association, would be the best one to start with.
Why don't we start with Ms. McGilvery? Ms. McGilvery, are you there? Ms. McGilvery? There we go. Good morning. You're muted, Ms. McGilvery. We cannot hear you. There you go.
All right, here we go. Just one correction right at the beginning. I was president of the Community Association, followed by being a past president of the Community Association. But at this time, I am not part of the Community Association, other than I'm a resident in the area still, just to correct that. I have been involved with 368 Carling now for over 3 years and have watched what has been going on back and forth. And during this time, I really just lost confidence in what Cardell was saying to us, because what they said and what they did seemed to be two different things. And with the episode also with the next door neighbor, the medical clinic, Cardell just really went at that owner over there, and eventually that owner put in their own septic system because they just couldn't fight the legal battle over maintaining their sewer system, which was right at the south property line end of the Cardell property. So we're coming into this with some lack of trust, really. Now, we did have a recent meeting with Cardell that Cardell made some efforts to try to improve their image within the community. And that was mostly concerned with the hedgerow that it's at the back of the property. They, as the architect just told you, they made an agreement, a verbal agreement at that time as we're standing outside, for a 1.2 meter rear setback from the property line. And yet I got a note this morning from the arborist saying that the 1.2 would be from the neighbor's fence. Well, the neighbor's fence is not on the property line. It is within, I don't know exactly how many inches in, but it is definitely on the neighbor's property. So the original agreement was to have a critical root zone of 1.2 from the property line and not from the neighbor's fence. I also wanted you to know that when we initially started working to save the hedge, that the arborist who ascertained the critical root zone gave us the number of 70 centimeters. And then it went to 80 centimeters. And then we got involved as a community association and we studied just how to do exactly. And we actually talked with the arborist to find out exactly how do we do this. And we measured all the trees so that there would be no choice in just measuring a few trees and getting a critical root zone from that. So we measured all trees and came out with a 1.2, quite a difference, 50% difference, quite a 1.2 critical root zone. And so we've been working with that since then. Now that is a few years old, but it is relatively accurate. Actually, I did another critical root zone myself in the last few days because the arborist did not come and do another one as he stated that he would. When we had the meeting with the arborist a week or so ago, he said he would come and do another one. But since he didn't do it, I did another one. I found that it is at 1.22 now because there's a couple of years difference between the first one and this one. So I would like to make sure that the agreement that we made and also what the architect stated is that the 1.2 meter critical root zone will be from the property line and not from the fence. And also, I would like you to know that the property line is indistinct at this time because some of the stakes are missing. I'd also like to talk about the venting for the next door neighbor. We have repeatedly stated that garage venting and gas meter venting and other venting from dryers, that this causes a reaction of the patients that go to the medical clinic next door. And we have asked, you know, how this can be redesigned. We've talked to them right from the beginning, 2.5 years, 3 years ago. We mentioned all of this, and yet they're not speaking to it. Not one thing they said, other than the garbage, did they talk about the venting. So the building needs to be, you know, slightly corrected here, because right now the meters are all right by the garage area, or not the garage, but the parking area for the clinic, which means right by where people get out of their vehicles and walk into the building. And that's where that is. And then where some of the patients sit outside while they're having, you know, if the weather's good, having some of their treatments, the garbage area is now sort of right there, and it's outside, whereas initially it was in the building.
Ms. McGilvery, can I just stop you for a second? We need to address the issues. We need to address the issues of this application. And the issues on this application are 3 minor variances. We need to stay on point with respect to those minor variances. Please go ahead. You're muted again, Ms. McGilvery.
Thank you. You saw my mouth moving without the words.
Yeah.
No, it was just really, I wanted to give you a background of what has been going on and why we were watching this so closely. We received today, as I was saying, a note. We received it today, this morning, a note from the arborist saying that the critical root zone will be done from the neighbor's fence. That is incorrect, and I'd like that changed. Also, we need to look into the garbage outside, because that is a major problem for the, you know, for the neighbors there, well, the neighbor to the south, as well as all the patients that come in to the neighbor to the east. So I particularly would like to work on those things. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. McGilvery. Madam Coordinator, is there another person that'd like to speak to this? Well, before we go to the next person, I'd like to ask Ms. Hill if you have any comments with respect to Ms. McGilvery's comments.
Well, if the arborist has made a 2-inch error, that is regrettable. But we certainly have committed to put to not disturb the soil any closer than 1.2 meters to the property line. As discussed at our last meeting on site, we won't be venting the parking garage in the direction of the neighbor, but we will have some dryer vents on that side of the building. It's a residential building and we need to vent somewhere. I have shared the approximate locations of those vents with the immediate neighbor, the owner of the medical facility. And I know people are very sensitive about where we put our garbage, but we've worked awfully hard to find a solution that we think best addresses all of the concerns that people have expressed to us.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Madam Coordinator, do you have anyone else that would like to, Ms. McGilvery?
Hello, are you with me?
Yep, I can hear you.
All right. Just one thing that I wanted to add into this was the shoring up of the soil. Because Cardell went in and dug out the medical clinic sewer line, which was at the south end of the Cardell property, because they went in there and dug it out completely, and because they had to go down about 9 feet below ground to get it out, they disturbed all the soil that goes along beside the cedars. So one of the things that we asked in that outdoor discussion of we asked them if they would shore it up so that when they dig for the retaining wall, for putting it in, to shore up the soil, close to the cedars at the 1.2 mark to shore that up so that the cedars can survive, because that soil now is fragile and it could easily just cave in.
Thank you. Ms. Hill, do you have any further comments?
Yeah, the retaining wall is now proposed to be almost 3 meters from the property line. So we are confident that we can get that retaining wall in place without disturbing the soils within 1.2 meters of the property line. During construction, so we don't plan on using shoring because we don't think we'll need shoring. But if during construction there is a problem and it looks as though we will undermine the soil within that proximity to the property line, we will take appropriate action.
Thank you. Last comment, Ms. McGilvery.
Yeah. Sorry, just as I come back to that statement, the thing is that when they know that there is a problem, the problem will already have happened. The soil will already have dropped away from the roots. So it's too late. This is to prevent any movement of the soil because the soil is not compact. It's temporary soil that's put there. So it does need shoring up.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. McGilvery. Yes, Ms. Hill.
We've been in conversation with our soils engineer and our engineer for the footings of that wall and taken all of this into careful consideration. That's why we made this latest revision to our plan.
Thank you. Madam Coordinator, do you have another person that would like to comment on this? And keep in mind, I think it's Mr. Nelson, the next person up, that we need to have new information added to this conversation. Please don't repeat other things that have been already said. Thank you.
Actually, Mr. Chair, we do have a speaker on the phone who had wanted to speak, and I do believe she is from the Community Association.
All right, please put her on. Can I have your name, please? Hello, someone on the phone. Is there somebody from the Community Association who'd like to speak? Who's on the phone? Not getting anything. How about we move on to Mr. Nelson then, and maybe the person on the phone will be able to join us after. Mr. Nelson?
I got an alternate.
Yep, we hear you now, Mr. Nelson.
Okay. First of all, thank you for allowing me to speak at this hearing. First thing I would start the video. Sorry. Okay. First thing I'd like to comment on is the original application asked for a 1.5 or reduced landscape buffer. Ms. Hill is now saying they don't require nearly as much, but their application asked for, I think, 4.5 meters. And what's to stop them from going back to what was in the application if this is approved? How do you make sure that they are locked into what they're saying now?
The application does ask for a 1.5 meter landscape buffer.
Yeah, but they've changed that.
No, they didn't change that.
I thought Ms. Hill said they've changed it to almost 3 meters.
I'll let you finish, Ms. Hill. Sorry, go ahead. Ms. Hill?
Yeah, so we have not changed our variance request, but we have changed our site plan. So now we're showing 2.9 meters there. We'd like to continue with our application today. So I understand we can't actually change that number on the application. If the committee would like to provide some certainty to neighbors by tying us to the plan, we're open to that, but I would caution that we need to have a little bit of flexibility on the plan to allow for coordination during the site plan approval process. I'm sure there must be some way though of coming to a reasonable conclusion on that.
Deputy Secretary, did you have something to say?
Yes, I was just going to clarify that Ms. Hill's comments are correct. Typically, if a variance application is approved, it would be tied to plans, at least as it relates to the variances requested. But we are able to amend an application on the floor if we're reducing the extent of the relief sought. So if it's improving the situation, we can make that amendment if that's if that would give everyone comfort and if that's the applicant's preference. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Ms. Hill?
In that case, I would like to request a change to my variance to request the landscape buffer of 3 meters to be reduced to 2.5 meters. I believe that would allow a little bit of wiggle room just in case during site plan approval process we need to make some adjustments. So I have no intention of changing the plan.
That improves the requested variance by almost a meter,
Yes,
giving you much more room to be able to do what you want to do.
yes.
Does that help you, Mr. Nelson?
Yes, it does. I'd also like to address the issue of garbage. In the original proposal, the garbage was included in a part of the building. That requirement then reduced the rear yard setback considerably. So by moving the garbage out of the building, they've removed the requirement for a reduced rear yard setback, but they have now asked for a new variance for outside storage of garbage. Now, I live about half a kilometer away from this site, and every night I'm getting raccoons visiting my back deck quite regularly. I have green bins, both old new ones that the animals can open very easily. Last week at the sailing club across the road, I watched a family of raccoons going through all the garbage bins over there, and they have no trouble opening anything. So I think outside garbage is very undesirable. It's going to attract animals. It's going to attract smells. And the other concern I have is it appears there is no indoor garbage storage at all. So does that mean the tenants have to walk out every day and put the garbage into these bins? I can't see them doing that in the middle of January. And a lot of times when you see things like the closed bins around street corners, people just throw stuff around them. So I would like to know why the city has requirement that garbage be stored indoors, and why in this case they're not questioning what they're doing.
Mr. Walker, do you have any comments with respect to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As noted in staff's report, the intent of that provision is to prevent the accumulation of rubbish on the property and reducing negative visual impacts from abutting properties. The intent of the bylaw was not to, I guess, allow people to be able to throw their garbage out during the winter without going outside. Given that the garbage will be completely enclosed within the sheds, the department is satisfied that the intent of the bylaw would be met.
So I will go back to what
One
Peggy
moment,
said.
please, Mr. Nelson, I'd like to hear from Ms. Hill if she's got any comments with respect to the garbage bins.
I appreciate the concern about animals, and the bins will have to be designed to be animal proof. Also, I didn't note this before, but these aren't going to be just the kinds of bins you'd go to Home Depot and purchase. They're going to have to be made specifically for the site in order to because the pre-manufactured ones are not heavy duty enough. So consideration will be given to animal proofing. And there will be somebody overseeing that property to make sure that snow is cleared and the property is maintained. And it will be their responsibility also to ensure that tenants aren't disrespecting the site by littering.
Okay. Mr. Nelson, new information, please.
The problem with this is that if it turns to be a problem after the building is built, it's very hard to go back and correct it. Now, on the same issue, are there any provisions for green, black, and blue boxes, or is recycling a no-no in the site?
Ms. Hill?
There would also be blue and black recycling on site. I don't think there's
closed in those.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially 2 of them are for garbage and 2 are for recycling. So that balance can be adjusted over time depending on people's need. As people have less garbage and more recycling, it can be shuffled up.
Okay. I'd also like to make a comment on the issue of parking. As Ms. Hill mentioned, Carling Avenue does not have any buses on it at all and stop. So our transit system in Crystal Beach is very poor. On a Saturday night, there's nothing running at all. We had a development at 9 Leaving just beside me, which is 29 units, and they said it was going to be for senior lifestyle units with very little parking, and each house has 1 parking garage and 1 spot. Well, what we're finding now is this is all families, and we got cars everywhere. So this business of 1 car per unit, I don't buy that. The other problem is that the front door is located on Bedale, very close to a traffic light. There's no way anybody can stop and unload at the front door. You're too close to the light, and that's a no stopping zone. So this site has no way of people unloading stuff, of trucks unloading furniture. You're all going to be either parked in Carling, which is very deadly, or they're going to be blocking a traffic light on Bedale. I know this is not part of the community adjustment process, but it's an issue that's going to be unsolvable once it's built. The other point I'd like to also mention is the consultation. The last hearing, the day before that, I had emailed Ms. Hill asking them about the Arborist report. The result was a big panic on Tuesday afternoon that resulted in the hearing being adjourned on the Wednesday morning. This morning, we got another report at the last minute from the Arbor's report. So it's hard for us to know just exactly what is current on this whole project. It's like a revolving door. So thank you very much for your comments. And I'm against the parking and the garbage. And I think other people have addressed the what do you call it, the landscape buffer. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Coordinator, is there someone else that'd like to speak to this issue? I see that there's a Kevin Brewer on the screen. Or you're muted, Mr. Moore. There we go.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me okay with this headset?
Yes, I can. So I just want to remind you, we'd like to listen to some new information. If some information has already been presented by the other two speakers, please only stick to the new information, please.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Kevin Brewer. I'm the current president of the Crystal Beach Lakeview Community Association. First off, just generally speaking, we do want this lot developed. It's been an empty, broken asphalt lot for 10 years now. So we are hopeful this will be developed hopefully soon. And just another quick note, I just would like to thank Cardell. They did come up with a good plan about the hedges. We're reasonably confident this will save the hedges, and that'll be much relief to the neighbors. So some of my colleagues here have already gone through some of the variances, so I'll just quickly go over that. We are concerned about the parking variance. As people pointed out, there is no bus service. There's no easy place to get groceries, so you're going to have to drive. Even at 1.2 spaces per unit, you're going to have people with more than one vehicle. And what's going to happen is that's just going to offload people parking on the Dale, which is a bike path, or onto the other community streets. So we do have safety concerns over that with parked cars and cyclists. And ultimately, it's going to be putting the parking enforcement on the backs of the residents who are going to have to deal with this, especially, not to mention our winters with plowing. So we are concerned over the reduction to 1.07 versus 1.2. We're also concerned about the garbage sheds, which Rick has gone and covered all my points about odors and nuisance wildlife, so I won't go into that. The landscape buffer has more or less been addressed as well. The 2.5 meters is much better than 1.5 in terms of the hedge, and still some concern over that. But my main point that I'd like to bring up is that the last time this went to the Committee of Adjustments, it was ruled against because, and I quote, the variances would result in the overdevelopment of the lot. Now, Cardell has reduced the variances to 3 and almost 2.5. But the actual footprint and number of units and square footage of the internal building itself hasn't actually changed. And all these variances, including the parking, the garbage room, and not so much the landscape buffer, are all revolve around the fact that you're trying to put more units on a small parcel of land. So the slot, in our view, is still being overdeveloped. Intensification is fine, and that is current plan of the city, which we can all appreciate, but we're going from beyond single residence dwellings to 15 times that value or that number. So we put forth that this, if there's slightly less units in the slot, you wouldn't have to have these variances and its negative impacts towards the community. And lastly, this is beyond the scope of this panel, but this is zoned as commercial residential, and right now there's only residential, so we're not getting any commercial benefits as per the zoning. And I think that's all my points that I'd like to and I'll just add quickly for the garbage issue. We are close to the greenbelt, so we do have additional wildlife problems that more centralized urban areas may not have. So that should also be sort of pointed out for the garbage problem.
Yes, I believe
And
both Ms. McGilvery and Mr. Nelson have pointed that out.
Yes, that's right. And I'll leave it at that. So that's our concerns from the association.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have another person that would like to? Yes, Ms. Hill, would you like to reply to some of the comments Mr. Brewer had?
I just wanted to point out that our footprint has actually reduced fairly significantly. So the building has gotten smaller on the southern end. And I don't have the number handy, I'm sorry, but it's more than 3 meters. So our rear yard setback, which I think used to be around 7.5, is now at 11.1.
Okay, thank you. Madam Coordinator, is it Mr. Stuart Ferguson next on up?
Yes, it would be Mr. Ferguson.
Okay, Mr. Ferguson, welcome. Please keep your comments to only those comments that are new.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, good. Okay. First of all, I am on the adjacent property to the east of Cardell. I talked to at the meeting last Tuesday. Roseland and I were having a talk about my critical root zone, which affects me and all my trees. I did ask if they were going to put a privacy fence in. I have not got any response. I've sent an email yesterday and haven't been able to get any.
Mr. Ferguson, we need to address ourselves to the three variances here.
I'm ready. Okay. So as far as the parking, first of all, there's a ramp that goes down, and she says it's at the level of the garbage cans, which are 5 feet, I presume. So that means that to go back up the hill, you're going up fairly quickly, and even at the you have a chance of hitting kids, because we have a younger community now with a lot of young children. I see them out on their tricycles, their bicycles and whatever, and they're still young kids. I think there's quite a risk with the parking going on to not so much as Bedale. I'm more worried about the other streets like Stillwater and whatever, which have no sidewalks. And that will force the kids into the middle of the street. As far as the garbage, I cannot see it not affecting us because we're next door due to odor, due to animals and whatever. The other one was as far as the distance at the back by the cedar hedges. That's why I mentioned about my cedar hedge, my hedges are trees on the side property. If they start digging, my landscape is going to fold in towards Cardell's property, and I will lose the trees I have, especially if they're not going to put up some sort of a fence for a privacy. Anyway, I'm totally against the parking and the garbage. I don't have a lot of confidence with Cardell, but that's here nor there. Anyway, I think that's the best way to say it. We are concerned about the exhaust and everything else because we have a medical clinic there, but that's another issue. One other question is, because I don't understand all this, is there going to be, like this is basically you're going to give them the footprint or the permission to start this if you decide. What about the next step? Do we have, is there variances in that, or is that an area we can comment on eventually?
I'll let Ms. Hill talk about that.
Okay, I might have to defer that last question to the city. But with regard to the fence, Stu, I apologize. I seem to have written down your email address wrong, but we've managed to connect. And if you could check your inbox, we are proposing a fence for a portion of that lot line. And as discussed with the arborist and you on site at our last meeting, the excavation we're proposing on your side won't affect your trees. If you would like your trees removed, at our cost early on, because some of them are weedy, then talk to us, because we're open to that.
When will that be done? Sorry.
If you want some of the weed trees that are on your side taken out, we'd like to do it when we take out the weed trees on our side, which is this season. So we'll continue that conversation offline.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's all I had to add.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to get some comments from the panel. Mr. Vort, anything to comment or question?
Well, I think while a lot of issues have been raised, the issues before the panel are fairly limited and narrow and relate to the variances that are being requested. I think a lot of the other concerns that have been raised are more properly addressed through the site plan process. And I understand the property is going through site plan review. So those would just be my comments. I believe that the variances requested do meet the tests. They're fairly minor. The proposed development is permitted by the local commercial zoning. And I suppose, just by way of a general comment, what's being proposed here is probably a lot better than what could be proposed here if it was a more of a commercial use. And I think the design of the building does transition to the neighboring residential area. I know that infill is always something that's difficult for existing neighborhoods, but it is also the policy of the city and the official plan to increase density within the urban area. So those are my general comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vort. Mr. Lewis, any comments or questions?
No comments or concerns.
Thank you. Ms. Chandler, any comments or questions or concerns?
I'm afraid I come with a few. First question, just so I understand, is what are the on-street parking restrictions on Bedale and the adjacent street right now?
Ms. Hill, do you have an idea?
To the best of my knowledge, that there is limited parking at the very close proximity to the stop light, because that's always a limitation. But that apart from that, it's the same parking regulations throughout the city, where you can't park more than 3 hours at a time. But maybe some of the community association members want to correct me on that.
Mr. Brewer, do you have a handle on the parking restrictions in the neighborhood?
To my understanding, Rosalind's correct on that. It's the standard. There's no special, aside from whatever no parking signs are along Bedale, there are no special restrictions in that area, except yes, the 3 hours in the day and no parking overnight, I believe. I could be wrong.
Okay, so specifically, what are the no parking restrictions on Bedale? Is it one side of the street only, or?
My understanding is that you just can't park too close to the stoplight.
If somebody, Mr. Nelson, you raise your hand, you know more about this? Unmute Mr. Nelson, please.
Okay, I know when Crystal Beach was set up, the bylaws that the PN put in was parking is allowed only on one side of the street because the streets are narrow. There was a bit of parking in Bedale on one side, south of the property for maybe 2 cars, and there is some parking on the street behind it, again, one side only. But as has been mentioned, there are no sidewalks in the community, and our streets are all narrower than what's required by the present zoning rules. So you couldn't build this with the street anymore. So there's, and also where the front door is you're into the actual zone for the traffic light. So it's also means a problem.
I understand that. I know I'm familiar with the area, and I was curious to see, I know some of the neighborhoods or streets in the area have asked council to enact some on-street parking restrictions specific to certain areas to address certain things with a fair amount of success. So moving forward, should this be approved, if there are issues related to on-street parking and dangers certainly to kids, that would be something to explore, to limit where parking can happen in the neighborhood, particularly around this development if it becomes an issue. So I wondered if there were any in place right now. A question for Ms. Hill. Where is the bike storage for this? Because I mean, it is within summer biking reach of commuter paths and future transit and Bayshore. So if there's going to be limited parking spaces, how have you guys provided for bike security?
So right now we're showing all of the bike racks outside, close to the front pathway, which is we decided to show them all outside. And that's the location that was preferred by city planning staff who are part of the site plan approval process. We previously, on a previous application, had asked for indoor parking at the head of each parking space, so that the person, if you owned a car and parked it, you could also use the wall in front of your parking space. But you can only do that with a minor variance. And there was concern expressed about the number of minor variances we were asking for. So we eliminated that. However, there is wall space in the parking garage, and the owner is absolutely open to mounting bike racks there in the future that exceed, so that what we're showing on the site plan meets the zoning bylaw, and we don't have a zoning issue anymore. Then we can be free, as the building is occupied, to install bike racks in the parking garage to meet everyone's needs. It's no longer a zoning issue, it's just a practical issue of meeting people's needs.
So there is space for bike racks inside, because my experience is unsecured bike storage is not where people want to keep their everyday bikes out in the elements and where people can touch them, but there is space inside still. It's just not counted as part of the zoning at the moment.
Right, wall mounted space.
Is there any visitor parking space required or provided?
Yes, the 3 outdoor spaces are for visitors.
Okay, so those aren't interior spaces that are being moved exterior, and it's a requirement for 3.
Yeah.
And that's in addition to the 1.2 resident parking spaces. So you have 16 resident spaces plus 3 visitor spaces.
Right.
Okay. Now, I'm getting to the end. If the requirement for the garbage to be stored interior to the building, this might be, maybe you can answer this, or maybe Mr. Walker, what is the trigger for the interior parking storage? Is it the type of building, the number of units, or is it related to exterior parking spaces?
Mr. Walker, can you respond to that?
Yes. So your question is, what triggers the garbage storage to be stored inside as opposed to outside? So it's a provision in the LC zone. It's just a provision in the LC zone that all storage must be inside of a building and not outside.
So if a convenience store was built there, they'd have to put their garbage inside.
Yes, that's a provision of the underlying zone.
This is a bit of a struggle for me, because for residential garbage, which in a residential neighborhood would be stored outside. So Mr. Walker, if this had zoning that was residential, that allowed for 3 stories, 15 units, would they be required to store their garbage inside?
If it was a residential zone, in some residential zones, there are provisions that would require garbage to be stored in a certain way. However, to answer your question, no. But in some residential zones, there are requirements for garbage storage. But in a typical residential zone, there isn't.
So, because what I'm wondering is, like, this interior exterior garbage, is this being triggered simply because this is a residential building that's being built in a light commercial zone?
Right. So it's not triggered because it's a residential use in the local commercial zone. It's just a provision in the underlying local commercial zone. So it doesn't matter what was being proposed on the site, the garbage would need to be stored inside of a building as opposed to outside of a building.
Okay.
But I think if this property had been zoned purely residential, we wouldn't have this variance. Is that
So
correct?
you're
Mr.
thinking if this was an R3 zone, which I think would accommodate this building, that garbage would be allowed to be stored outdoors?
As long as it's enclosed, I believe so. Can you confirm that, Mr. Walker?
Yes, I believe you are correct. It's required to be enclosed within certain residential zones, but it's not required to be within a building.
Okay, I wanted to make that's important, because this exterior interior garbage, while I understand concerns of residents, if it's simply because of the zone, not because it's a 3-story residential building, garbage is stored outside on residential properties all the time. It's okay. Did I have any other questions that ended up here? No, that's it. We can move on to the next person.
Thank you. Mr. Otto, any comments, questions, or concerns?
The only comment I have or question I have is in regards again to the garbage. For 15 families, I don't think 4 outdoor sheds, from what I saw with 3 cans in them each, is going to be large enough. But that's the only comment I have.
Ms.
So
Hill?
we've been following the garbage guidelines from the City of Ottawa very closely. And and we've also been through, on the previous application, we had started our site plan application process with the same quantity of garbage. And the quantity of garbage has never been flagged by city planning staff in that zone, in that site plan review process as being in error.
Ms. Hill, is this garbage going to be a private contractor, or will it be the city's contractor?
It will be a private contractor.
So then you would be able to determine how many times a week you could have this garbage dumped and removed.
That is correct.
Okay, thanks. Ms. Chandler, do you have a comment?
One last comment or clarification, perhaps for Mr. Walker. This application, and the community should hear this as well, this is not the last stage of the application. It's going to go through a site plan control application, at which time all the details in terms of the design and everything will be looked at. They can't really deal with it until the variances are set. Mr. Walker, is this site plan control application for public consultation and circulation as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it is. That's correct. The type of site plan application is manager approval, and it's subject to public consultation. And so when the site plan control application moves forward, there would be a sign posted on the site. There will be notifications sent to the community members, and it will be also posted on the city's development applications webpage. At that time, the public will have an opportunity to provide comments on the overall site plan control application.
So to be clear, a lot of the items that were raised relating to vents, fencing, and that sort of thing will be shown in detail through the site plan control process, and the community will have an opportunity to look at that and comment to city planning at that time.
Yes, that's correct. A lot of the issues that were brought up this morning, including transportation issues, issues of the trees and other engineering issues would all be explored at the site plan stage, and the residents will have an opportunity to provide their comments there.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Mr. Otto, do you have any comments, questions, or concerns?
I already made them. Thank you.
Okay,
No further
perfect.
comments.
Thank you very much. Now, I'll go back to the community, and I see Mr. Nelson has one hand up. I'll just go and take one more question from the community. Would Mr. Brewer like to make that question, or some other member of the group?
If Rick has a question ready to go, I'll let him go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Nelson. You're muted again.
Okay, it appears from what Ms. Hill is saying that the landscape buffer variance and the garbage variance are strictly due to the zoning being commercial. Why didn't you just ask for zoning change? Why didn't you just ask for zoning change rather than putting variances on the commercial zoning?
Mr. Nelson, we're going to be just dealing with the 3 variances that are on plan. We don't need to go through the question, the reasons why they made a decision to go this route. We're going to deal with these three variances today, and we'll see how this process works through as you get to the site plan.
Okay, the only reason I say that is Mr. Chandler was saying that these variances wouldn't be required if they were different zoning, that's all. And I couldn't understand why they didn't go that route.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. So at this time, I believe the compromise that Ms. Hill came up with today, by adding another meter onto the landscape buffer, is a real solid addition to the variance. I believe outdoor garbage bins, they're going to be properly designed. They're going to be, the amount of garbage is going to be picked up on a regular basis based on the volume that is created by the residences. I don't think there's going to be issues with respect to that. If there are going to be more vermin or raccoons that are going to be in that garbage, I'm sure that the residents will be wanting to have that removed on a more regular basis. I don't have any issue with that. To reduce the size of the parking lot from 1.2 to 1.7 per dwelling, I don't have an issue with that, given the reason that everybody wants to go to more public transit. We are looking at pedaling everywhere. We're looking at LRT and more buses. So I don't have a problem with all 3 of those variances. At this time, I'd like to ask the panel for approval of this application. All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Your variance has been approved. Thank you, Ms. Hill. Thank you, community.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate for your input. Bye, everyone.
I will leave now. Thank you very much, Chair.
What's the odds of letting panel 2 deal with their own applications?
We seem to have lost Mr. Poulin, the chair, so we'll give him a couple minutes, I think, to reconnect.
There he is.
I was leaving too early because we were at the last one.
Sorry. Why don't we just, well, we can put the last one off for a couple of weeks. What the heck?
Sorry about that. So now moving on to application number 10. And I think Mr. Otto has been excused because of a conflict. I'd like.
Yes, that's right.
Susan Otto. Susan, are you here?
Yes, I am here.
Great. So because we don't have a statutory declaration for you, I need to administer an oath. Are you prepared to take that oath now?
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing, as instructed, and was clearly visible and legible during the time?
I do.
Thank you. Can you give us a brief explanation of your application today?
Yes. Well, I'm the agent for this application, and what the application is for is to create 2 residential lots. One is a 1.0 hectare lot on the 9th Line Road, close to the corner of Pana Road in the Metcalfe area, and there is also a concurrent application for a second residential lot just around the corner on Pana Road. These two lots actually touch each other at the back, the side of the Ninth Line Road one and the back of the Pana Road one. There are two existing residential lots already on the corner of Pana Road and the Ninth Line Road. So the remaining property is a rural farm property, and it would be have a retained area of 34.5 hectares with quite a bit of frontage, 821 meters along Pana Road frontage. If I can direct you to the Ninth Line Road application for the lot, we have a proposed easement as part of this severance. It's on the right-hand side of the lot, the south side, and it's between the wooden fence line of a horse pasture that's at 2302 Ninth Line Road, and there's 6 meters away from that to the north is a wire stone fence line that has been there forever. And what we're asking is that we be given the easement right of way that's between those two sections, which is about 6 meters wide. We've been using that for a long time as passage onto Ninth Line Road. I ride my horses there. I go next door. The next door neighbor comes over using that line as well. We keep it mowed, and it would be a very good buffer zone as well between the future owner of the Ninth Line Road lot to prevent them from coming right up against that horse fence and perhaps causing problems with the horses, one neighbor to the next. So that's why it's important to us if we could be granted that right of way. Now, the second lot, which is a concurrent application, is on Pana Road, and it is slightly smaller. It's 0.82 hectares with 55 meters of frontage on Pana Road. And the only question I have about that is as far as the condition of the City of Ottawa as regarding the well. We are proposing that on the Ninth Line Road lot, from what I understand, we're required to do a hydrogeologic report as well as a well. We're prepared to do that, but we wonder whether it would be possible to allow that information to be used for the water situation on the Pana Road lot, which is right beside it. It abuts at the back. So we're wondering whether that could be allowed. The other thing is in the conditions from the City of Ottawa regarding the it's condition number 2. It's about the conveyance of the 3 meters all along Pana Road in the existing farmland. We would like to. I've been notified by the planning department that the legal department will appeal the severances if the right of way for Pana Road on the retained portion is not given. Normally, I understood that the Committee of Adjustment has been waiving that requirement, but as of today, apparently, the City of Ottawa is wanting that to be enforced. I'd like to point you to a couple of problems that might occur in that respect. If the right-of-way is taken and we continue to farm it as a farm, and the farm we're using it would use crop protection such as pesticides, and it's within a new right-of-way of the city, there's a pesticide law for the city, I believe, so that could be a problem. And the other thing is, as far as upkeep of the current easement that's on our road, there are a lot of trees that stick out that you almost bump into them if 2 cars are passing. There's noxious weeds growing on. Would the city be required to upkeep the additional 3 meters as part of the new rule for the easement. The next question is, if the land is given to the city and the city property becomes general public property, would the general public be able to enter into that land? We have offered as a kind of a compromise, would it be possible to register on the deed of the retained parcel that should the city widen Pana Road right of way, then the right of way would be given at no charge. However, we were sort of given the impression that that would not be possible. So in order to not hold up the application, we're going to agree with the 3 meter buffer zone, but I wonder about my questions. And then another question I have is, for the 2 lots, the size of the lots, would they be reduced in size? Could they be reduced in size by the 3 meter easement, so that the back measurements would still be the same? I think that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Ms. Otto. Mr. Walker, can you make some comments on behalf of the city?
The department has reviewed the application and has no concerns with the proposal, subject to the conditions below. Would you like me to sort of answer Mrs. Otto's questions now, or would you like me to answer them once you move into the conditions?
Why don't we do that when we get into the conditions?
Okay, perfect.
Okay. So, any comments from Mr. Lewis?
No, no comments.
Mr. Revord, any comments or questions?
None, thank you.
Ms. Chandler, any comments or questions?
I don't have any comments or questions this time, but I may in relation to the conditions. I'm interested in what Mr. Walker has to say to these questions that Ms. Otto has raised.
Thank you. Ms. Otto, you've seen those conditions. Have you got, so we've understood that you've got a couple of concerns with respect to the road widening and the agreement with respect to quality and quantity of water and the aquifer report. I'll ask Mr. Walker now to address those concerns that you have.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Walker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess I'll start off with the condition for the hydrogeological report. So essentially, we would need a hydrogeological report to demonstrate that the properties can be adequately serviced if when the hydrogeologist does the field work, if it's determined that the lots are hydrogeologically sensitive, then he or she might recommend that either a well be drilled at that before we can clear the condition, or that we place a 30-centimeter reserve in front of the property. If the lots aren't hydrogeologically sensitive and there aren't any concerns with the well on the property, or any specifications between in terms of the distance between the well and the septic system or the casing of the well, we won't require that the well be constructed prior to clearing the condition.
One question I think Ms. Otto had was, could the hydrological report be used, the one that they do for the for one lot, be used for the 2 lots?
So typically, when we have these conditions for severances where 2 lots are being proposed, one report's generally prepared, and it would satisfy the condition for both. It might mean that they might need to do a test pit on each site. Again, I am not an expert in this, in that matter, and I have directed Mrs. Otto to our city's hydrogeologist, who can provide more information on that.
Thank you. Next question.
Oh.
I think Ms. Otto had several questions in her. So on with respect to the road widening.
Yeah, so the next one be the road widening request. So over the past few years, the department has been requesting road widening on both the severed and retained parcels, which is consistent with the policy, the provincial policy statement, and the city's official plan, which is a council approved document. Road widening would apply to both the severed and retained parcel. It has been the committee's standard to remove it off of the retained parcel. The department has had a lot of internal discussions about that, and the department has also consulted with legal on several occasions. The staff has mentioned it both in our written report and verbally that this requirement is, or this road widening is a requirement as per section 1.6.8 of the PPS and section 2.3.1.21 of the official plan. And so this is why we request the road widening. The department has several options. We can continue to ask for it. And if the committee, decides not to give it, another option that we have, which wasn't our first choice, but it is to appeal decisions where the road widening has been removed. And at this point, the department has very little options left. And so if, in a sense, it's not just this application, it's all applications going forward where road widening is required. If it's removed from the conditions, and the department will be appealing those decisions. In terms of the question about who's going to maintain that strip of land, it would be owned by the city, and so the city would be responsible for maintaining that strip of land. In terms of the question, to Mrs. Otto's question about the pesticides, well, that's not a provincial policy. That's not a municipal policy, it's a provincial policy. And so I can't speak to that. In terms of Mrs. Otto's question about having a agreement on title that the road widening would be acquired at some point in the future, after consultation with our legal department, it is determined that would be very difficult to enforce, and it's not the recommended approach at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Walker. Mr. Lewis, any comments or questions or concerns?
I'm very concerned about the road widening thing. I think it's totally wrong. I'd urge panel not to impose it, but you've kind of got the applicant over the barrel. Very least, let's add the phrase after the road widening on the retained lands be at the city's expense. What do you think of that one, Mr. Walker?
So the road widening, the condition is not at the city's expense, it's at the expense of the applicant. The city, it's not the city's standard practice to pay for road widening. The city can acquire the land because
it's not acquiring. I think it's acquiring. It's almost, for lack of a better word, almost theft. I'm at the committee's, whatever the committee wants to do in this one, but I am certainly not in agreement with what's happening.
Mr. Walker, do you have an idea of how much it would cost to survey that portion of land? I think on this case, it's about 879 meters, 821 meters long. Do you have an idea of per meter how much it would cost to survey that land?
Unfortunately, I am not a surveyor, and I don't really get involved in the cost of these type of activities, so I can't speak to the estimated cost of surveying that piece of land. So
what would it cost to take this application to the local planning appeal tribunal? If you were to take this one to the local panel appeal tribunal.
So again, I don't have the fee on top of my head, but I can check and confirm the fee to you.
And just my cursory real quick look at how much it would cost per meter, I'm under the impression that it would cost about $10 a meter to do that survey. So that's about $8,300 to do that survey. That's on the cost to the applicant. So I'm just wondering what the break point is for the city. The city going to spend that same amount of money too? Or...
So I just did a search, and it appears as if LPAT application is $300 for each appeal. The requirement is, it's based on policies from the province and based on policies that that's approved by City Council, and we're only upholding the policies that exist.
Thank you. Mr. Revord, any comments?
Well, Well, I think in this particular case that the applicant has agreed to the road widening, so I think it would be a bit odd for the committee not to impose it if the applicant's consented to it. That being said, I think this whole issue bears further discussion between the committee as a whole and planning, because it's not just as simple as following the policy in every circumstance. So those are my general comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Chandler?
I have two questions for the applicant. I want to make clear that the applicant, okay, well, here's a question for everybody. Is there any interest on the applicant's part in adjourning the application at this point so that the committee can further discuss a few of these items with the city or yourselves and get back to you with respect to pesticides, tree bylaw, and costs associated for surveying? Is there any interest in doing that? Because this application is the first one in which the city has stated that they will appeal if there is a road widening not imposed.
Yes, there is an interest.
Okay.
Sorry, correct. You are interested in perhaps adjourning at this point and letting us pursue this further? Because we haven't had a lot of time to work with the city on this, or you would prefer to proceed with the road widening imposed?
I have an interest in having the committee pursue this, so long as I'm hoping it won't take years. And I'm also questioning, with the city being able to impose certain rules on title, why would it be so difficult to not impose that rule on title, as far as if the city should require road widening in the future, that the right of way be given at no charge? Why would they not be able to enforce that when they're able to enforce a lot of other sections that they put on title?
I think these are all good questions that'll give us an opportunity to address these if we get a little bit of time to do that. Deputy Secretary Treasurer, is there a timeline you think that we need to set here to try to accomplish getting some more information from legal and from the planning department?
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure that there's a short time frame that I can commit to, recognizing the number of parties that would need to be involved in this discussion. I don't imagine it would be years, as the applicant was alluding to, but whether it might be a month or more, I don't know that I can commit to a time frame.
Ms. Chandler?
Well, what I would suggest is, if the applicant is comfortable, is that we set another date for, say, 6 weeks from now. And that'll give us time at least to give some feedback. And at that point, the applicant can decide if we want to continue pursuing this. Maybe we'll have a solution by then, or that their time has run out and they're interested in just proceeding and having us hear it. I think it's really up to, in my opinion, because this is the first one that's caught, it's really up to the applicant in terms of what they would prefer.
Agreed. Mr. Lewis?
Yes, I would certainly agree with that if we could set a date for 6 weeks. I wonder if you're also going to question the idea of the extended easement becoming public property and therefore being able to be used by members of the public.
I think we should pursue all these things, although I must admit that there's lots and lots of, I know for sure there is lots of publicly owned land that is not publicly accessible, but we can certainly get that confirmed.
That would be great.
Mr. Lewis, did you have a comment?
Yeah, the problem is we're going to have more of these in 2 weeks and more 2 weeks after that. You hear what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
We need to know very soon. So,
Mr. Walker?
Mr. Chair, while I can't promise or confirm a date that we can have a discussion at this point, our legal department is aware of this ongoing situation, and I can have a chat with my manager and our legal services department today to try to confirm a date as soon as possible that we can have a discussion on this matter.
So if that's the case, would you be amenable, Ms. Otto, to a September 16 adjournment?
Yes, that would be fine.
Okay. So we'll stand this item down until September the 16th. And Deputy Secretary Treasurer, you're going to try and get us a really quick opportunity to discuss this with legal and planning?
Yes, I will, Mr. Chair. I think we'll aggregate all of the comments and questions that have come up into one sort of correspondence. It's appreciated that the city's already aware and maybe anticipating some of these now for Mr. Walker's comments. And we'll hope to get a commitment from the city to respond as soon as possible. I'll pass that along.
Okay.
I'm sorry, was that September 6 or 16?
16. I wonder if it's something that we want to offer applicants going forward until we have a resolution with the city that we'll end up adjourning these until we get a solution that is amenable. So recognizing that we've got some more, we've got August 19th and September 2nd coming up where we will likely have more of these. So if you can impress upon legal and Pete that we've got more of these coming down the pipe, we want to be able to address them with a compromised solution, hopefully. Okay, that's my 2 cents. So we'll adjourn this this application until September the 16th, and I don't think we have any other business unless anybody else has any other comments. Oh, okay, great. Thank you, everyone.